When you're deploying new police officers, they're going to saturate the areas where crime is high. And unfortunately, that's in the lower socioeconomic areas, the poor communities. And when you put police officers there, they're going to address crime in that community. And I think the people that live in these communities are the ones that actually want their police officers to be police officers again. They want their blocks to be cleaned up. So the How Many Stops Act is basically to document pretty much all interactions by police officers with the community, with the public. It's not going to be a couple of seconds. It's going to be at least a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes, maybe more, 10 minutes. If you're telling police officers you're going to do this paperwork, they're probably just going to hesitate to even do anything. I feel like people that live in these communities will probably, unfortunately, suffer more crime because it might make police officers hesitant in conducting their investigations.
I'm Liam O'Neill. Welcome to New York Insider. Michael Alcazar, thanks for being on New York Insider.
You're very welcome.
Welcome to the show. We want to talk to you today about crime in general in New York City. I've seen stats that suggest that it's going down, but when I talk to people in social media, a lot of people don't necessarily think that way. And you have 30 years of experience in law enforcement. Where are we at? What's your opinion on crime today in New York City?
Well, the stats showed it's down. I have suspicion that maybe numbers are perhaps being manipulated. That's happened in the past, right? But I think for most New Yorkers that live in the city, you know, riding the subway, walking the sidewalks, they probably feel for the most part, because they live here, that it's not as bad as what we see in social media or in the news, because it's magnified, especially like on Instagram. Everything's highlighted, it's all crimes. So I think the police officers are doing a good job. I think crime has gone down, but it is wintertime, so traditionally crime goes down in the colder months because bad guys just don't like cold weather. We'll see what happens in the summer. Like I was in the subway today, it felt perfectly fine. It felt perfectly safe. I didn't even see any homeless people. So I think NYPD is doing a good job. But again, you know, sometimes for some people, perception's reality. And when they see it on the news, they see it on social media over and over again, they get afraid. And I think most of that's coming from probably outside of New York.
Is that right? People looking at New York.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at some statistics, looking at some stories and blowing it up out of proportion? Is that
I think so. A lot of
fair?
my friends that don't live in the city think like, oh my God, what a disaster. I'll never step foot in that city. You know, but that's what they see. That's what they see on social media. That's it. They don't live here. They don't walk around here.
Okay. 30 years of law enforcement, as I said, mostly as a detective?
Yeah, half as a detective. Yeah.
And the other half as an officer.
Patrol officer.
Patrol officer. Off camera, before this interview, you were talking to me about a time when New York City was, I think you said Disney World, in terms of crime, or Disneyland, right?
Sure.
But we're not quite there yet now. What's happened?
It's not quite as bad as the 90s. So the 80s and 90s, if you ever seen a HBO show called The Deuce, I think they did a pretty good job portraying New York. That's what it looked like when I was growing up, right? Topless joints all over the place, prostitution walking around. And then came the Giuliani era, and he cleaned up New York really well. I was part of that. I was an undercover in Vice. We hit all these locations, and we closed down a lot of locations. Times Square was no longer known for drugs and prostitution. It became like it looked like Disneyland. You could take a picture with Buzz Lightyear, and I think that was largely because of the efforts of the New York City Police Department. We did such a good job cleaning it up that it brought a lot of tourists back to New York City, made it really safe. I always talk to my students how they're very comfortable riding the subways with their fancy Beats headphones, and they're watching a movie on their tablets, right? And you do that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, and I go, yeah, you're welcome. That's because of the police department.
A big change, in other words.
A big change.
From 80s, 90s to this Disneyland era, as you like to call it.
Huge. Gave birth to the hipster population, right? A lot of transplanted people from everywhere coming to New York. Now they're New Yorkers, right? And they look at policing in New York because they weren't here during the 80s and 90s. Now they see it, and now they're very critical because now they're saying, why are the police still so aggressive, right? because they didn't understand the history. The police department is a victim of their own success. They did such a good job. Now people coming, transplanted from everywhere. Now they're criticizing, why are police so aggressive? We are probably at fault also because we didn't tailor policing, right? We were just very aggressive during the Giuliani, Bloomberg era. We cleaned up New York, and now people are criticizing us. So we probably should have retrained our police officers. Maybe we shouldn't have been so aggressive, right?
I see.
Everyone's very critical about that. And that gave birth to defund the police and all kinds of action that happened.
Which is a national thing,
Yes.
but it definitely had its role here in New York City. You think?
Yeah, we're the largest police department in the country. So yeah, we were front and center. So everybody wanted to see the policing change, right?
Say it again.
They wanted to see policing change.
They wanted to see policing change.
They were very
I see.
critical of anything that happened in the country. If it happened somewhere else, we were guilty of it too, right? Stop, question, and frisk. They wanted to monitor that, and which they did. They wanted body cams, right? Because of George Floyd. And
Okay.
So it gave birth to all that. So a lot of scrutiny fell upon policing, especially New York City Police Department.
You're covering a history that goes about 30 years, right? This is your tenure. And you're going from a time when it's really rough in the 80s, 90s
Right.
to a really great period, peaceful period, where crime is historically at an all-time low. And the rest of the world is learning from the successes of New York City with the broken windows. That
Broken
term
windows
was,
theory. Yeah.
right? The broken windows theory was made famous by New York City.
Sure. Yeah.
But then stop and frisk was another policy, came under a lot of fire.
Right.
And then that marches us into the 2010s, where you start having this backlash against, like you said, the police and their own success. And right now, we're not quite as bad as the 80s, 90s,
No, I don't
but
think
we're
so.
not as good as we were in the early 2000s. Is that fair?
Exactly. Yeah, we're somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And where are we going from here? Are we getting better? Are we getting worse?
Hopefully it gets better. It depends on the mayor, the higher ups in the police department, where they're going to take policing for the future. A lot of new programs are in play that might handcuff the police. I think we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people are Monday morning quarterbacking the police department because they're not police officers. They think it's something that they can implement that's not going to be a detriment to policing, which I feel it might hamper investigations. It might slow down. We have mass migration of police officers leaving, right, and having a difficult time recruiting, not just in New York City, everywhere. So it's going to be a tough time. And I believe we were like 34,000 strong. Now we're down to they're saying 30,000. It might even be less. So we're losing a lot of senior police officers. We're losing a lot of police officers. A lot of police officers are not staying to 20. Like myself, I did 30. A lot of people are leaving for other police departments in other municipalities where they're more welcome. I know a lot of friends moved to Florida where they're more police friendly, where they're more appreciated. And I think they feel they're not getting that here in Manhattan, in the city.
I see. So there is this backlash against the police force in New York City, but also other places around the world. But it's really taking a toll on our numbers here.
For sure.
In New York City.
Yeah.
What other things are handcuffing, so to speak, the police force?
Yeah, well,
Hamstringing them.
let's start with the DA squad, right? With the bail reform. They're not prosecuting. They're releasing prisoners. Most of them are getting arrested that day and they're released that day. So it's sending a bad message to the public, a good message for the bad guys, right? Because the criminals are getting arrested and they're released that day. And they're going to tell their other friends, hey, I got arrested for, shoplifting or, I was just released today. So the punishment is not equated with the crime, right? So bad guys think, well, if he got away with it, maybe I'll get it. They're not prosecuting anybody. Maybe I'll do that too.
What's behind that? Why is the DA not prosecuting criminals that they would have prosecuted 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah, it's something that they talked about in the past that they studied about discrimination, institutionalized discrimination, where they're saying that some people are not getting a fair shake because of their background, their status in the community, because they don't have jobs, they don't have education, and they felt like they were being targeted and they were being kept in prison longer. So they tried to adjust that.
Yeah.
Right. But I think, I think it's just sending the wrong message. Right. You're arresting somebody and then he's released the same day. It's just the message is not getting out there that crime is being punished or people are being released on their own recognizance. Just today, I heard a story about a stalker. I don't know if you heard about this. A stalker for, Taylor Swift. Did you hear about this story?
No.
So she had a stalker that's been stalking her like 30 times. And they just keep releasing him. That same day that they released him, he went right back dumpster diving and stalking her.
Jeez.
So they're not getting it. The bad guys aren't getting it. If you're releasing them, they're like, oh, they're not taking this seriously. I'm just going to commit more crimes. And that's just a small sample. That's a small example of something that's happening.
So you said earlier, if I'm representing you correctly, so in the 80s, 90s, could you say the police were very aggressive to clean up a big problem, but now they're far less aggressive. And one of the reasons is DA is not, or one of the parts of that DA is not prosecuting. There's also this backlash against the police, institutionalized racism.
Right.
This cry that NYPD is a racist institution and is targeting non-whites.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
There's also qualified immunity. In the past, when you're a police officer, if you did your job within the purview of your duties and you did it because you're doing the right thing, right? It's to protect somebody. Like let's say if you made an arrest and you had to use physical force and the perpetrator got hurt because of this, but you're doing it and while you're making the arrest in a lawful way, you were protected with qualified immunity because you're not going to get sued. But now that's off the table, we think. So police officers don't have that luxury anymore. So they might get sued criminally. They might get sued civilly, not criminally. They could be arrested civilly and sued civilly. So
they're not They don't have the protections that they once
don't have
did.
the protections.
So now, therefore,
they're hesitant.
Right? They're scared.
They're afraid to take action now. Right? And again, that's why a lot of them are leaving the police department because they feel like the police department probably doesn't have their back anymore.
They're afraid they're going to be on social media and become the next big story that angers thousands of millions of people.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So what about this charge that NYPD is racist? They've come under a lot of fire for that.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, 99% of police officers do the job the right way, right? But the sad reality is when you're deploying police officers, when you're deploying new police officers, like coming out of the academy, they're not going to deploy them in an area where crime's not happening, right? They're not going to put them in Bayside, Queens, where nothing's happening. They're going to saturate the areas where crime is high. And unfortunately, that's in the lower socioeconomic areas, the poorer communities. That's where they put police officers. And when you put police officers there, they're going to address crime in that community, robberies, shootings, burglaries. And there's going to be more police presence. There's going to be more foot posts.
Yeah.
And of course, they're going to make more arrests because they're going to be there and they're going to do their job. So I can see where the perception is that we're targeting brown and black communities. But that's just where the stats go.
They're not doing it because of the color. They're doing it because of the stats. They're
that's
following
just the crime stat. That's where it's happening, right? That's where it's happening, and that's policing. That's policing. That's what you do. You know, it would not work well if you put them like in Flushing, and now they're just doing nothing to fight crime. Nothing's happening, right?
So you've just presented a great segue into a hot topic of the day, the How Many Stops Act, right?
Yeah.
It was vetoed last week by Mayor Adams,
Right.
Who campaigned on a Clean Up the Streets campaign, right?
Yeah.
And he won on that. But now he vetoed this act. And talk us through that. How do you feel about the act, first of all, and also explain what it is?
So the How Many Stops Act is basically to document pretty much all interactions by police officers with the community, with the public. Mm-hmm. This has already been documented under stop, question, and frisk, right? UF 250 reports. So it's a level 3 stop. Level 3, level 4. Level 4 is probable cause, mm-hmm. documented by an arrest. You have probable cause to make an arrest. That's documented arrest. And then a level 3 is reasonable suspicion that this person you stop, which you can do a forcible stop, may have committed a crime, is about to, may, or did commit a crime. That's a level 3. What the Stops Act wants to do is address level 1, level 2. Level 1, level 2 is, level 1 is request for information. Who can request for information? Anybody. You could request for information, right? Okay. It's not a pointed question. It's not a accusatory questioning, right? It's just a request for information. Level 2 is a little bit more pointed. It's common law writ of inquiry. Common law inquiry is just, again, who can do that? Anybody. It doesn't have to be police officer. If you're in your backyard, you hear something going on, hey, what are you doing over there? It's pointed, right? You're trying to figure out if something's happening. That's a level 2. They want to document all that. I think what the mayor said was he'd consider not vetoing it if they took level 1 off the table, right? But we already have the 250, right? So if
we already have level 3 and level 4.
We do. Required. That's already documented. And if their goal is to track like how many stops are being done per race, you already have that. You already have that with a stop, question, and frisk, right? This is just something else. I don't know what their goal is. I don't know if they're, again, I feel like they're trying to handcuff the police. They don't want police to interact with the public, right? Without documenting it. Which I think will hamper investigations. So a level 1, so say we just had a serial stabber, right, in Queens, right? So police officers, detectives go out there, and this is level 1. Do you know anything that happened here? Can you give us some information on what happened with this stabbing, right? This is good policing. This is good detective work. We're trying to make this arrest as quick as possible with a partnership with the community, getting information, right? With this this act, they want us to document every person we interact with, whether they give you information or not, right? So if they give you information that's not probative, that doesn't lead to anything, that's not good investigative information, they still want you to document their race, their gender, their age, the whatever question you ask. Okay. Right? So I think they feel like the city council and the proponents of this bill, they feel like it's not a big deal. Right. I heard someone say it's going to take a couple of seconds. It's not going to take a couple of seconds. Nothing takes a couple of seconds.
They say it's on the app. It's on the cell phone. You can just boop, 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 boop,
right.
A couple seconds per
person. It's not going to be a couple of seconds. It's going to be at least a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes, maybe more, 10 minutes, right? Just think about that. This is policing, right? We're just walking around and asking for information to help solve and stop crime. If the police officers have to do this for every single person they stop, it's just going to slow down policing. We're already short-staffed, right? We're already understaffed. We already don't have enough police officers. Now you're going to take them away and do more paperwork for something that went nowhere investigatively, right? Mm-hmm. So when I was in the squad and we did say there was a shooting in a neighborhood, we're going to canvass for witnesses, we're going to canvass for video, we're going to canvass for witnesses, and we're going to talk. We do document that already. We document that already on a DD5. It's a complaint follow-up, meaning an original complaint came for the shooting. Now we do a complaint follow-up on every person we spoke to, negative or positive information. We already do that.
But it doesn't have their race, their gender, their age? Or...
Oh, no, it does. We document all that. We did. We already have done that. But now they want to do that on a patrol level. Everybody does it. They want everyone to do it. We're already short-staffed. We already can't handle the volume of 911 calls. Now you're going to take a police officer off to do this report for something that wasn't even fruitful, that led to nothing. It wasn't an investigative lead. So, it's New York City, right? We're like 8 million people. You're going to ask a police officer to do this. It's going to take a lot of time. It doesn't seem like it. They make it sound like it's going to take a couple of seconds, but it will. It'll take a lot of time. And,
It's
you know.
telling, isn't it? I mean, Mayor Adams was a captain,
Yeah.
right, of the police
Yeah.
force, so it seems like he would stand to know a thing or two about,
Sure.
you know, the reality, right?
Sure.
It's easy to say, yeah, it's just an app, it works easily.
Yeah.
But the opponents are saying, one of the reasons is, no, it's going to be cumbersome. That's what you're
Right.
saying. And cumbersome to the point where maybe it limits the number of people that the police officers can be talking to, and maybe even will prevent some of those conversations. Is that
Yeah. And it works both
accurate?
ways. It works both ways. So,
How do you mean?
so right now it's strained. It feels like that people, it's strained, right? Relations with police and communities, they don't want to talk to the
Right.
police, especially they don't want to talk to police where other people can see them because they're afraid that they're snitching, right?
I see.
So now you're going to ask them for their information.
I see.
Right.
I'm not going to talk to that officer. He's
Right.
going to ask for my information.
You're just going to destroy the relationship between the community and the police, right?
Wow.
And then this might also, police officers might, now they're like, oh, I don't even want to talk to this person now because I got to do this report. You know,
Right.
who wants to do more paperwork in any job?
Right.
Now you have a police officer doing it. So the bad thing is now police officers might not even go ask questions when they normally did it. Because now there's this paperwork. And now we got body cams. We have the body cams, we have the paperwork. So you got to match up all this information. Oh, you talk to somebody, they're going to check the body cam, which is fine, but it's just a lot more work for the police officers. They're already overworked. They're constantly handling thousands of 911 calls, demos, right? They're taken away from patrol. They're doing demos that they have to respond to in uniform. It's just a lot to undertake, you know, for the police officers. And I think that's why a lot of them are leaving. It's just too much. It's just too much.
Too much work. Too much pressure. They're not protected.
Too much work, too much pressure. They're unappreciated. You know, as a police officer, when I was a police officer, I never told anybody what I did, right? Because, you know, everyone loves firemen, no one likes cops, right? Because, you know, they're all afraid of what the police officer is going to do, what you're doing, right? So
Right.
we never share what we do, especially now in this current climate, right?
Much more scrutiny.
More scrutiny. They're afraid for their families. You know, I know most police officers don't tell their neighbors what they do because they're just afraid of like any kind of negative backlash. So,
Wow. That's pretty tough condition to work under.
I think so, yeah. I think so, especially in this current climate. There's like an atmosphere of lawlessness in New York, right? With the smash and grab burglaries, you know, hopping the turnstiles, a lot of the victims being pushed in the subways, you know. So it's tough. It's tough to be a New York City police officer.
Yeah. And the DA doesn't have their back.
It doesn't appear that way. It doesn't appear that way. You know, they're just releasing them. Just to go back out there. It's like an insult to the police officer. A police officer probably got hurt making this arrest, and while he's still doing the paperwork, the criminal is out, you know, released. So it's an insult to injury.
So in that tough climate, it makes sense why many officers are retiring early, before 20 years, certainly before 30 years.
Yeah, so they're not
and
even
the
retiring.
recruits are also down.
Yeah, so they're not even retiring, they're quitting.
They're quitting.
So they're not even staying to collect their pension, and recruitment's down, right? And my fear is we might be settling for less qualified candidates because no one wants, my students don't want to be police officers anymore, right? So who are they recruiting? You know, are they loosening the investigations on these candidates? So
we haven't talked about this in front of the camera. So you retired from NYPD just a year ago or so, or half a year ago, after 30 years, but for over a decade you have been an adjunct professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice.
yeah, I retired in December of 2019, just before the pandemic, just before defund the police.
I see.
I always make a joke that, see, the police department fell apart when I left.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I left on my own.
Okay.
Not because of defund the
Anything?
police.
Just
Yeah.
it was time for you.
It was 30 and a half, and that was enough.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've been teaching at John Jay for 12, 13 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you have students who are not going into the police force.
They no longer want. In the past, before defund the police, yes, they wanted to do it. Now they don't want to do it.
So a very marked difference in the last 3-4
Yeah,
years.
I had a few of my students pass up on it. They were called to go into the academy, and they're delaying it because, of course, their family, their moms don't want to be police officers, you know. And I never push them either way, which way. It's their decision. So yeah, absolutely, I can see that recruitment's down, and most of my students did not want to become a police officer anymore. Yeah. And I think that's nationwide.
Not just their mothers, maybe.
Most of
Telling
their
them
mothers. No mother wants their son to be a son or daughter to be a police officer.
Right, but that's in any time, right? I mean, there's always that
Sure.
hurdle of getting over your mom being afraid that you're going to get shot out in the street somewhere,
Sure.
even in the best of times.
Yeah.
But in the last 4 years, 5 years, there's this other added pressure.
Yeah.
Do you see the situation in the police department potentially getting worse before it gets better?
Honestly, I don't know. I hope it's going to get better. Hopefully the numbers are accurate. Hopefully crime is going down. I firmly believe the police officers are doing a good job, and hopefully they can continue doing a good job. I would hate for New York, to lose police officers and not retain any, and we spiral into, crime-ridden city. Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
So this act that was recently vetoed, and now the city council is poised to, 34 votes will override the veto, I think it is.
Yeah.
Could the fate of the police department in the next several years hinge on this passage or not passage of the act?
Yeah. If they pass this act and it's implemented, I think, like anything else, the police department is going to have to do their best with it, but I think it's going to severely hamper the relationship between the police department and the public. And I think who's going to suffer? The public. It's going to benefit criminals because sadly, I think it's going to slow down policing. It's going to slow down our response time because now we're going to get inundated with more paperwork.
Proponents of the act will say what? That it benefits people of color.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's one of the strong messages behind this act. Pass the act because the police department is racist and biased in who they are questioning and stopping.
Mm-hmm.
So if we pass this act, which is just no more than a few seconds on the app, people of color will benefit because there will be less scrutiny or less.
Yeah, that's what they believe. I feel like people that live in these communities will probably, unfortunately, suffer more crime because it might make police officers hesitant in conducting their investigations, right? I mean, if you're telling police officers, you're going to do this paperwork, they're probably just going to hesitate to even do anything. Don't you want your police officers to walk around and ask information like, do you know who did this, to help solve it? Or do you want police officers not to do that stuff? Because I fear that that's where it's going to lead. It's just going to, hesitate.
A breakdown of community, breakdown of trust, breakdown of policing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the people that live in these communities are the ones that actually want their police officers to be police officers again. Because I have friends that live in these communities that they're afraid for their children to go outside. They can't walk to the bodega. I have a friend whose nephew can't even play outside for fear of gang recruitment or drive-by shootings, which has happened, shots fired. So, they feel it. And I know most of the good people in that community want their police officers. They want their relationship. They want their blocks to be cleaned up. They don't want the drug dealers on the corners. They want to be comfortable walking from the subway to go home. They don't want to be mugged, right? Who wants that, right? And now you're just gonna leash policing with paperwork, right? What side are they on?
Yeah.
Are they on the bad guy side, or are they for the good people, the community, the public?
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't sound like they are. It sounds like they're just trying to paint us police officers with the same brush, you know. And the reality is that most police officers, 99% of them, do the job the right way. You know, it's a calling for most of them, and they want to do it the right way. And it's a shame that it's going to probably, I feel, it's going to lower morale, right? They're not going to want to do the work. They're going to quit. They're going to leave. They're never going to want to do it again. They're not going to recommend it. And New York City will suffer.
Police force was a calling for you. Is that right?
It wasn't a calling for me.
Was not?
It was not. It was not.
It was an accident?
It was yeah, it was an accident. I'm the one and only police officer in my family. It was something that I had to do at the time. I was a college kid in Baruch College studying to be an accountant or marketing management, and didn't have any hobbies. Ended up getting my girlfriend in a family way. So my friend said, you know, you better take this job. It pays decent at the time, and it's got good benefits. So I had to drop out of college and just take care of my family.
Okay.
And it turned out to be a good job. So good, I stayed 30 years. So I really enjoyed it. Nothing I aspired to be, nothing I planned on. It was just a lot of good things happened when I became a police officer. So I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful for New York City for providing for me and my family, and led to John Jay and all kinds of good things. So yeah, for me it was a good thing. So hopefully other police officers have good experiences like I did.
Yeah, you can hope, but you've expressed some doubt.
Yeah.
What's your recommendation for legislative folks and the mayor, the city council? What could they do at this point?
Well, I think the mayors did the right thing by vetoing this How Many Stops Act. That's a step in the right direction. I believe the mayor, for the most part, is very pro-police because he does have a police background. I think he does want to fix the city. He inherited, a crime-ridden city from the previous administration, so I don't envy his task. The city council has got to stop crucifying police officers, because the reality is most police officers are good. They're trying to do the job the right way. We need to increase morale in police officers. Right now, I don't feel like they think anybody's got their back. They're underpaid. They're overworked. We're working them more with the less police officers we have, right? We have investigators, right? We're suffering also in investigative units because they're relegated to patrol. So we have first grade, second grade detectives that are seasoned veterans standing on footposts because we don't have enough police officers, right? So that's discouraging. So that's why I think a lot of them are just retiring and they don't want to do it any longer. We gotta change the culture. It's going to have to be more positive. If you want to get more police officers, we're going to have to change the culture. We have to support our police officers. We have to put prisoners in jail, keep them in jail, keep them in prison. We got to prosecute them, right? We can't let them get away with whatever they're doing. These pop-up robberies, pop-up burglaries, shoplifting. We have to discourage that. We have to bring back anti-crime. We have anti-crime light now. They're walking around in khakis and basically a uniform. That's easily identifiable by bad guys. They can see them a mile away. There's got to be an element of surprise in policing.
Some undercover.
Undercover. I did undercover work for 5 years. So bad guys have to keep looking over their shoulders because they should not be comfortable committing crime. Yeah. They have to be aware. They shouldn't only look for uniformed personnel. They shouldn't be like, oh, is that guy undercover, right? They should be uncomfortable. It's a valuable tool.
Criminal element is way too comfortable.
Everything is working for the criminals right now. Everything. right? They can readily identify police officers. They get arrested. They get released. Everyone hates. It seems like everyone hates the police. So everything's working for the bad guy right now in New York City. So that's scary.
Mm-hmm. Before we wrap up, we haven't talked about this at all, which is in the last couple of years we've had an enormous influx of illegal aliens, of immigrants.
Yeah.
How is that fitting into this crime surge?
Well, we got a lot of migrants looking for work. I wouldn't be surprised if they, go into the underground economy, right? Because they're looking for work. I'm talking about like maybe human trafficking. It's not unusual for migrants to be trafficked into like sex work because it's something that might be readily available, something that they can make money to provide for their family, right? They don't want to do it. Maybe they don't want to do it. Maybe they're victims, but there's definitely a possibility of that.
It seems we haven't seen sex work in New York City for 2 or 3 decades, and yet overnight almost it seems to be happening. There are posts online of in broad daylight prostitutes walking down the streets.
Yeah, they're not willing to prosecute prostitution anymore. So I don't think it ever went away.
Oh, is that right?
It just went underground.
Okay.
But now, of course, it's an open market. Pretty much when I was a new investigator undercover, it was not unusual in the 90s to see prostitution walking around all over New York. And I think it's back.
Yeah.
So, sex workers unfortunately attract the migrant community because they don't have other means of employment. So I can see that, coming in a bad way.
Yeah. And so it's just one more element that makes the police work difficult.
And it's going to make it, and it's more difficult because we're not using investigators, right? Everybody's relegated to patrol. So a lot of these investigative units are not recruiting new investigators. They're just doing patrol work. So that suffers. Like we have homicide units, special victims, vice, narcotics, right? How are we going to fill those units if we don't have enough police officers to do patrol? So it's a heavy undertaking for the police department to juggle manpower.
Wow.
To address everything that's happening in New York City, and everything happens in New York City.
Wow. And you're afraid with the passage of the act, if it is to be, the veto is to be overridden and the act passes, that it's just going to be keeping police numbers down further.
I think it's just going to delay response, right, to 911 calls. So police officers won't be able to answer as many jobs because now they got to do paperwork for something that's not even probative, that didn't lead to any kind of investigative steps or leads, right? Because they have to do it for fear of, reprisal from their supervisors, that you got to do this paperwork, right? Because it will be under scrutiny. If they pass it, it will fall under heavy scrutiny. That did they do this work? It will be part of their activity. Did you do that paperwork? They're going to probably compare it again to body cams. So it's definitely going to delay response, and that's my fear, that the citizens of New York are not going to get the police response that they need because there are going to be less police officers out there because they're doing this rudimentary paperwork.
Yeah. Well, Michael, thanks for sharing all of your wisdom and experience. You offer a lot, and thanks for coming on the show.
Yes, sir. Thank you.